Ancient Rome's beast punishment. In ancient Rome, the crowd roared with excitement. Thousands packed the Colosseum. They weren't there for games. They were there to watch criminals die. The crime had to be serious: murder, treason, insurrection against Rome. The punishment was always the same: damnatio ad bestias, condemned to the beasts. Guards would drag the criminal into the arena. No weapon, no armor, just their bare hands. Then the gates would open. Lions, bears, leopards, sometimes wild boars. The terror in the criminal's eyes was part of the show. The crowd would cheer as wild animals circled their prey. Some criminals tried to run, others froze in fear. Neither strategy worked. There's a famous legend about a man named Androcles. A lion was released to kill him, but the lion recognized him from years before. When Androcles had removed a thorn from its paw, the lion refused to attack. The emperor was so amazed. He pardoned them both. Accounts from the era are shocking. Tens of thousands of people died this way. The entertainment value made it a staple of Roman culture. This terrifying form of public execution lasted for centuries. Hanged, drawn, and quartered. England had a special punishment for traitors. It was called hanged, drawn, and quartered, and yes, it's exactly as horrible as it sounds. First the drawing. You were tied to a wooden frame, then dragged through the streets behind a horse, to the place of execution. Then they hanged you, but not until you died, just until you were barely conscious. Then they cut you down. You're still alive but fading fast. That's when the disembowelment started. They would cut open your stomach, then pull out your intestines. The famous Scottish warrior William Wallace got this punishment. The hanging brought him close to death. Once the organs were disturbed, the body goes into shock almost immediately. Most victims lost consciousness quickly from blood loss. After you finally died, they cut your body into 4 pieces. Your head went on a spike in London. Your body parts were sent to different cities. They spread them across the kingdom as a warning. The message was clear: betray England and this is your fate. This method was used throughout the medieval period. It was reserved for those convicted of high treason. The public nature of the execution reinforced power. The display of body parts served as a powerful deterrent. Breaking on the wheel. Picture a large wooden wheel, like from an old wagon. Now picture yourself tied to it, arms and legs spread out. An executioner stands over you. He's holding a heavy iron bar. This was called breaking on the wheel. It was France's favorite execution method for serious criminals. The executioner would systematically break every major bone in your body. Your legs first, then your arms, then your ribs, your shoulders, even your spine. The truly evil part? They were trained to keep you alive through all of it. Breaking bones hurts, but it doesn't kill you quickly. Some victims survived for days on that wheel, broken and displayed for everyone to see. Sometimes, if you were lucky, the executioner gave you a mercy blow, one final hit to the chest to stop your heart. But that was rare. Most criminals were left to die slowly. Shock and internal bleeding eventually killed them. The wheel would then be mounted on a pole, raised high so the entire town could witness. This method was used across Europe well into the 18th century. Lingqi, death by 1,000 cuts. China had an execution method so terrible, its name still sends chills down people's spines. Lingqi. In English, we call it death by 1,000 cuts. The executioner would tie you to a wooden frame, in a public square. Then, using a very sharp knife, they would start cutting small pieces, bit by bit. First your fingers, then your toes, then small chunks of muscle from your arms and legs. The executioner was trained in anatomy. They knew exactly how to remove parts of your body, while keeping you alive as long as possible. This could last hours. The goal was to make many cuts before you died. Some executioners claimed hundreds of cuts, but here's the truth. Most victims were given opium beforehand, to dull the pain slightly. Many received a mercy stab to the heart, long before reaching 1,000 cuts. Blood loss would kill you otherwise. Here's something shocking. Photographs exist from the early 1900s, showing this actually happening. You can still find them in historical archives today. What crimes deserved this horror? High treason, mass murder, killing your own parents. The practice was officially banned in 1905, but its legacy remains. One of the most horrifying execution methods ever devised. Scaphism, the boats. Ancient Persia supposedly created perhaps the most disgusting execution method ever described. They called it scaphism. But here's something you should know. This might be ancient propaganda. The only source is a Greek writer named Plutarch. He hated the Persians and often exaggerated their cruelty. But here's what he described. They would trap you between 2 boats, or hollow tree trunks. Only your head, hands, and feet stuck out. You couldn't move, you couldn't escape. Then they force-fed you milk and honey. They also covered your exposed body parts with more honey. You're stuck there in the hot sun. The milk and honey you swallowed, it gives you terrible diarrhea. You're sitting in your own waste. The honey on your skin attracts every insect for miles. Flies, wasps, beetles. They start eating your flesh. laying eggs in your wounds. According to the account, criminals could survive like this for over 2 weeks. Witnesses supposedly heard screams for days. Whether this actually happened is debated by historians. It might have been designed to make the Persians look barbaric. Either way, the description alone is nightmare fuel. The Brazen Bull. Ancient Greece gave us democracy and philosophy. They also gave us the legend of one of the cruelest execution devices, the Brazen Bull. Now, historians debate whether this actually existed, or if it's just a story, but here's what the legend says. Imagine a life-sized bull statue made of bronze. It looks beautiful, almost like art. But it opens up, and that's where they put the criminal inside. Once locked in, a fire was lit underneath the bull. The bronze would heat up slowly, like an oven. You were literally being cooked alive inside. But wait, it gets worse. The bull supposedly had special pipes in its head. These pipes turned your screams of agony into sounds, like an angry bull roaring. Your suffering became entertainment. Here's the ironic twist in the legend. The inventor of the Brazen Bull was a man named Paralyos. He presented it to the tyrant Phalaris as a gift. Phalaris loved it so much, he tested it immediately, on Paralyos himself. The inventor became the first victim of his own creation. Whether this actually happened is uncertain. No archaeological evidence has ever been found. But the legend has endured for over 2 millennia as a symbol of tyrannical cruelty, gibbeting, death as a display. Sometimes death wasn't enough punishment. The criminal also had to be humiliated. That's where gibbeting came in. First, they would execute you, usually by hanging, but then instead of burial, they put your body in a cage, a special human-shaped cage made of iron bars. This cage was hung from a tall post. At a busy crossroads or city entrance, your body would stay there for months, sometimes years. Everyone who passed by could see you rotting, could smell you decomposing. Birds would eat your flesh through the bars, while travelers watched. The famous pirate William Kidd was gibbeted in London. His body hung over the River Thames for over 20 years, as a warning to other pirates. Some criminals were gibbeted while still alive. They would hang in these cages, starving and dehydrating in public view, begging for water, begging for death. The cage prevented anyone from helping them, even if they wanted to. This practice was common in England and throughout Europe. Until the late 18th century, it served as a constant reminder of what happened to those who broke the law, buried alive. Being buried alive sounds like a phobia, not a real execution method, but throughout history, it was used as punishment in many cultures. In medieval Germany, this did happen for certain crimes, especially infanticide. Women who killed their newborns could face this punishment, but the most common execution for women? Actually drowning, called Ertränken in German. Still, burial alive did occur. They dug a deep pit, sometimes putting you in standing up, other times lying down. Then they started shoveling dirt on top of you. The psychological horror is unimaginable. Total darkness, the weight of earth pressing down, each breath getting harder as the air runs out. Some criminals clawed at the dirt above them, so hard their fingernails were found torn off. You stayed conscious for maybe 3 to 5 minutes. After being fully covered, those minutes must have felt like hours. Historical records show something amazing. Some criminals actually managed to dig themselves partially out before being forced back down. The method was considered more private than public execution, though the suffering was no less severe. Immurement, walled up alive. Imagine being sealed inside a wall while you're still alive. This was called immurement. It was used across Europe and the Middle East for centuries. The process was simple but terrifying. They would brick you into a wall, or into a tiny cell, sometimes in a church, sometimes in a castle dungeon, sometimes in the city walls themselves. In some cases, they left a tiny opening, just big enough to pass through a little bread and water. This would keep you alive longer, stretching out your suffering. Then, when they decided you'd suffered enough, they sealed that hole too. You died in complete darkness, complete silence, slowly starving or suffocating. No one could hear your screams through thick stone walls. When old European buildings are renovated, they sometimes find skeletons behind walls, sitting upright, hands worn down from clawing at stone. Some still have scratch marks on the walls around them. Traitors and corrupt priests often received this punishment. The practice served as both execution and eternal imprisonment, erasing the condemned from the world of the living. The guillotine's famous failures. The guillotine was supposed to be humane. Quick, painless, one swift drop of a heavy blade, and it's over instantly. That was the theory. But the reality? Sometimes the blade got stuck halfway through the neck. The executioner would have to pull it back up and drop it again and again, while the criminal screamed. Other times the blade was dull, from too many executions. Instead of slicing cleanly, it would crush and tear. Witnesses described hearing bones breaking and flesh ripping. There's a famous story from 1793. The blade took 3 attempts. The criminal was conscious through all 3 drops. Fully aware of what was happening, scientists used to debate something disturbing: whether the severed head stayed conscious after separation. Some reported seeing eyes blinking and mouths moving for up to 30 seconds after the blade fell. France used the guillotine until 1977, surprisingly recent. The last person executed was Hamida Jandoubi in September 1977. Star Wars came out that same year, in May. Despite its reputation as a humane alternative, the guillotine's failures revealed something: the fundamental difficulty of creating a truly painless execution. Electric chair horrors. In 1890, America introduced the electric chair as a modern, humane alternative to hanging. It was supposed to be instant and painless. It was neither. The first execution took 8 minutes. The criminal's body caught fire. Witnesses vomited from the smell of burning flesh. Blood vessels burst under his skin. One witness said they could have done better with an axe, but authorities kept using it, and it kept going wrong. In 1983, John Lewis Evans took 14 minutes to die. They shocked him 3 separate times. Smoke and flames shot from his head and leg. His body burned so badly, the electrode melted into his skull. In 1997, Pedro Medina's head literally caught fire during execution. Flames shot 6 inches high from the leather mask covering his face, the whole death chamber filled with smoke. Witnesses described the smell as the worst thing they'd ever experienced, like burning rubber mixed with barbecued meat. These failures led to increased scrutiny of execution methods and contributed to the ongoing debate about capital punishment in America. Modern execution failures. You'd think modern execution methods would be perfect by now. They're not. Even today, executions go horribly wrong. Lethal injection is supposed to be like falling asleep. 3 drugs, 1 to make you unconscious, 1 to paralyze you, and 1 to stop your heart. Simple, right? Except sometimes they can't find a vein. They'll stick you with needles 10, 15, even 20 times before finding one that works. You're strapped to a table, fully conscious, watching them stab you repeatedly. In 2014, Clayton Lockett's execution took 43 minutes. Here's what went wrong. The IV line became extravasated. That means the drugs went into his tissue instead of his vein. He remained partially conscious. He began to writhe and speak. Guards had to hold him down, while doctors scrambled to figure out what went wrong. He eventually died of a heart attack. Another execution in 2006 took almost 2 hours. The criminal's veins kept collapsing. He raised his head multiple times. To watch the executioners struggle. There's a drug shortage now, so states are experimenting with new combinations. No one knows if they'll work, raising serious questions about the reliability of modern execution methods. The psychology behind cruel deaths. Why did humans create such horrible ways to kill each other? It wasn't just cruelty for fun. There was twisted logic behind it. First, deterrence. Rulers believed that if punishments were scary enough, people wouldn't commit crimes. See what happens to traitors. You don't want to betray us, do you? Second, public entertainment. In ancient times, there was no TV, no movies, no internet. Public executions were free entertainment. Entire families would attend, bringing picnic lunches. Third, displaying power. A king or emperor wanted everyone to know, cross me and this is your fate. Fear keeps people obedient. Fourth, societal values. These punishments reflected what each society considered the worst crimes. In China, killing your parents was the ultimate betrayal. In England, betraying the king was unforgivable. Most countries abandoned cruel punishments in the 1700s and 1800s. Why? The Enlightenment era made people question whether torture was ever justified. Human rights movements pushed for dignity, even for criminals, fundamentally changing how societies approached punishment and justice. The conclusion and final thoughts. We've covered some of history's worst execution methods: being eaten by beasts, torn apart while conscious, broken on wheels, death by 1,000 cuts, possibly eaten by insects, and even modern methods that go terribly wrong. Some of these might be legends, like the Brazen bull and scaphism. Others are horrifyingly well documented, like the guillotine and electric chair. These brutal punishments shaped the laws we have today. The 8th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution exists because of this history. No cruel and unusual punishment. The Geneva Conventions, human rights laws, they all came from humanity saying never again. But several countries still use harsh execution methods today. Beheading, stoning, firing squads, public hangings still happen in some places. As of 2024, over 50 countries still have the death penalty. The debate continues. Is there a humane way to execute someone, or is execution itself always cruel? History shows us something important. What one generation calls justice, the next generation calls barbaric. Does any crime deserve the punishments we've talked about today? The question remains open, a reminder of humanity's capacity for both cruelty and progress in the pursuit of justice.